Go to war? Pray once. Go to sea? Pray twice. Prince Edward Island saying. The Coming Storm by Regina Hansen. April 25th, 1949. I don't know what wakes me up first, Mom shaking me or the screaming. My heart's racing even before I open my eyes. She's standing above me, her hair coming out of its curlers and her pink chenille dressing gown buttoned up to the chin. Come on, Beat, sit up, let's go. Mom's talking a mile a minute and her voice puts me in even more of a panic at first. Then I notice the look on her face. She's not panicking, just glowering like she always does when she's on edge about something. And that right there is enough to calm my heart back down. A little bit, anyway. There's a light on across the hall, and someone in there shrieking to scare the sin out of the devil. I'm sitting up now. I can tell you so quick I almost hit my head on the pail Mom's holding out to me. That's Deidre. Is the baby? Mom drops the pail into my lap. It's made of aluminum and hurts like blazes when it lands. The baby's going to fall out onto the floor if I don't get back in there. Now get a coat on and go pump some water. The grandfather clock in the hall is striking 5 as I set my feet down on the cold wood floor and head downstairs. It's not as frosty as it could be in April, but I'm still shivering like a dog in a wet blanket, or at least a dog in a yellow nightgown, which is what I'm wearing. I grab Dad's Macintosh off the peg by the oil stove, step into a pair of gum rubber boots, and there's Deidre again, screaming to high heaven and above it. I let the door bang behind me, thinking how I don't ever want to have a baby, not if it hurts that bad, especially not alone in some almost stranger's house, poor thing. Deidre's my cousin Jerry Campbell's girl, and notice I didn't say wife. She's been living with us since she found out for sure there was a baby coming 3 days after Jerry left for Boston States to fish cod off of one of those George's Bank trawlers, him plus Joe Curley and Numi Myers, with not a brain between the two of them. The boats go out for weeks at a time, and Jerry didn't even know about the baby until last month. He was supposed to be earning the money for their wedding and for a house so that they wouldn't have to depend on Mom and Dad, or worse, go live with Jerry's not-so-poor widowed mother, Sarah, which would be a trial, let me tell you. Now, Deidre's parents have put her out, and she's staying here in Jerry's old room. Jerry used to live with us when I was little. Sarah left him with Mom and Dad 2 weeks after she had him, abandoned him, and ran off south with some man nobody ever saw. Came back for Jerry a year later, but even then she was no sort of mother to him, always dressed up like your aunt's spare room in her American catalog clothes, while Jerry had to save his only shoes for school days. At least that's what Dad says. Jerry ended up staying with us off and on his whole life while Sarah was out running the roads, taking long trips to Halifax or Boston, all down the coast, even New York City one time. So he's really more like my big brother than my cousin, especially since I never had any brothers or sisters of my own. Mom couldn't because she had such a hard time having me. Says I've been giving her trouble since the day I was born, and she never lets me forget it.
Hey there, and welcome to another Reading Rule Y'all book talk episode. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Chea Parton, and I have another treat of a recommendation for y'all. Today, I'll be discussing Regina M. Hansen's The Coming Storm, and I want to give a shout out to Rob Costello, YA author extraordinaire, for putting this gem on my radar because it was seriously so good, and Rob always gives the best recs. So thank you, Rob. Today's episode is coming to you from my office once again on a beautiful, beautiful Indiana day. We have had such a mild summer, which has been absolutely lovely since I spent so many sweltering summers in the Texas heat. It's gorgeous today. The wind is blowing. There are big fluffy clouds in the sky, and it's such a nice breeze and mild temperature. Just everything about it is a beautiful day, which is great because, as Mondays go, this has been a pretty Monday. Maybe not the Mondayest Monday, but today's definitely Monday. My girl started her first day of school today. She's starting a new school. She was really excited. But the challenge of getting back into a routine is just always a challenge. So hopefully we'll get it together and things will get easier. But today has been pretty rough. So I'm glad the weather's nice because that sort of softens the blow a little bit. So let's get into it. As with every book talk episode, this one's going to feature a summary of the book and analysis of how rurality and place function in the book, and then some teaching ideas for the rural and non-rural ELA teachers out there who might want to recommend it to their readers during book clubs or lit circles, or use it as a whole novel text in their classroom. I think this book could work for any of those things. And I would highly recommend it for classroom use. There's so much that you could do with it. And I'll talk about one tiny little thing at the end of this episode. So first, the summary. On the day his son is born, Jerry shows up to the McNeil house dripping wet and riding the smell of roses, which haven't even begun to bloom yet. As Beat stares at him in the garden, he lifts his dead father's fiddle and begins to play a tune that feels as old as the sea. Having gone to Boston to fish, Beat knows that she's looking at Jerry's ghost. When Jerry's own mother dies shortly after him and her sister Marina Shaw shows up to the wake, Beat feels an unsettling pull of the ocean and hears the same lonely tune Jerry had played in the garden. Beat, her best friend, the town historian and librarian, and a visitor from Boston must work together to get to the bottom of the mystery of the music and what Marina Shaw wants with Jerry's son. Y'all, this book is a siren itself, singing you into the pages until you're lost in every word and lost in the world of the book. To say that it's good is a serious understatement. I mean, the cover is beautiful, and the characters on the cover really capture, I feel like, the attitudes and personalities of their counterparts in the book. So if you don't have it, I highly recommend that you get it, or at least, get it from your local library or whatever. Like, this is a story you don't want to miss out on. It's so good. So for the place-based analysis, because this is a sea siren story, the sea and place play a huge role in the movement of the story. It wouldn't be the same story or make sense for it to have taken place in the rural area that I'm from in the Midwest, given that I'm landlocked, which I think really powerfully demonstrates how place shapes folklore, the stories that we tell to make sense of ourselves as communities, as people, to make sense of the natural world, and also how place shapes just story and our understanding of each other and the world around us. A sea siren story, like I said, couldn't happen in the Midwest, just like a desert story couldn't happen in the Midwest. So every place has folk stories and folklore and folk music associated with how humans interact with that place and how humans interact with that environment. And this story showcases that really beautifully in connection to the sea and fishing, which I've been fishing, but not in the ocean. And I've been to the ocean, but I've never lived there. And so I haven't been affected in the same way by the tides, by sea squalls, by, that kind of stuff. The sand and digging for crabs and, all of those things that folks who live by the sea, including the characters in this book, do as part of their lives. And so I think that it really helps to disrupt the idea of rurality as this landlocked agrarian, tractor driving thing. And really helps us understand that there are different kinds of rural environments out there and that they might be different from ours. And so while some of the cultural things that come up in the book were recognizable to me in some way, there were a lot of stuff that I was unfamiliar with. And so I learned a lot about coastal rural existences in a way that and considered them and thought about them in a way that I never had before. And I think that's really important. And so I'm really glad that Regina Hansen wrote this book and that I had an opportunity to read it. So like I was talking about before, whether sea patterns, tides, lobstering and fishing, like all of these things play a really salient role in telling and understanding the coming storm and Beat's story. And like I said, I've been to the ocean, but I've not lived there. And so this particular brand of folklore and experience and belief systems are super interesting to me, but not something that I can 100% connect to. And I love that. This was it was a window for me, but a window that I could sort of see my own reflection in. And so I really enjoyed it. And I think you will too. Plants and animals are also really important to the story. The smell of roses announces the arrival of Jerry's ghosts. Goals, cries, and a particular minister goal are especially important to the story. I didn't know what a minister goal looked like, so I had to look it up. I've heard seagulls' cries before, but while reading, I also played some of those on YouTube to sort of like, put me in the world of the novel in a way that I couldn't be if I wouldn't have listened to those sounds. And speaking of sounds, the other place-based aspect of this book that I was just completely enthralled by and engrossed in was the music. So Jerry and Beat are both fiddlers, and there are many mentions of specific tunes played throughout the book. There's a concert, sort of like a community gathering concert festival sort of thing that happens in the book, and Beat plays in that along with her dad and some of the other townsfolk, the other community members, which is super relatable to me because my dad's a professional musician, and there's a pork festival in Tipton every year, and he's always on some kind of stage with his students, and I have sat in with him during some of his gigs, and especially those at the local Moose Lodge, and community members always get up and take part and play and sing, and it's always a special time. And so I really especially connected to that scene in the book and the way that music plays a role in this book. And I recognize some of the titles of some of the songs, but because they come from the particular time of the novel, which is not present day, but I think the first chapter is set in 1949. So it's sort of, it kind of jumps across time a little bit too, which is really cool, the way that Hansen does that, and the way that she considers time as part of place and how place is connected to time. So anyway, I could gush about all the really cool things she does all day, but neither of us have that amount of time. So it's historical fiction, and it's the music in it isn't today's music. And they're fiddle tunes because, that's what Beat plays. And so I found myself putting together a playlist of all of the titles mentioned in the book, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but I would absolutely use that while teaching the book. Some of the performances that I found are not from folks who are from Prince Edward Island, and so they might put a different place-based spin on it, but that's really interesting too, to listen to Maiden's Prayer performed by someone from Appalachia next to somebody who's from like South Texas is really, really interesting to hear the differences in the style, the inflection, and that kind of thing. So that's another thing that you might think about doing with students, because it's really interesting to think about too how place influences the way that music comes about and the way that music is played and the way that music styles are developed. I've put a few of the videos that I found and enjoyed listening to while I was reading the novel in the description to this video, and also the show notes of the podcast, the audio version. So be sure to check those out because they're really fun, and they also give a sort of tone and feel and ambience, I guess, to the book and to Beat's story that is really important And so I could, after listening and watching the videos, I could hear them while I was reading, and sometimes I listened to them while I was reading to really get an idea of what the world of, Prince Edward Island at this particular time sounded like, and how Beat heard herself and fit herself in it. And even beyond these particular songs that are mentioned in the book, this, like I said, is a sea siren tale. So the magic of music is, pardon the pun, instrumental to the movement of the plot, the build of the conflict, and its resolution in a way that'll give you goosebumps. So take that for what you will, but the end is so brilliant and so good. So that brings me to how I teach this book. I really can't say enough about the musical aspect of this book and the way that it frames and drives the story, as well as captures the place and the people who live there. So I'd want to do something with that. I think everyone connects to music in really particular in ways that are special to them. And they may not all look the same, or not everybody might share the same enthusiasm, but I think that music is a really integral part of who we are as human beings. And so I'd want to do something with that, selfishly for me, but also because I think my students would really connect with it. So I know that there are a lot of ELA teachers who offer the opportunity for students to do soundtracks or playlists to the text that they read. And I would do kind of a spin on that. So first I would invite students to dig into their own place-connected stories. And instead of coming up with a soundtrack or playlist for this book, since Hansen has pretty much already done that. And like I said before, by the way, I would make sure I collected all of those songs and had them ready for students to listen to as they were reading. I'd instead invite students to create soundtracks of their own stories. So if they were the beat of their own story, which it just dawned on me how brilliant the selection of Beat's name is. She's a farmer, so Beat sort of makes sense for that. Not that they farm beets, but And she's a musician, so BEAT. And she's the heartbeat of the story. So what a perfect name. Wow. Anyways, if they were the beat of their own story, what tunes would frame that story? How are they connected to place? And what parts of their stories do they tell? So this would be sort of like a 2-part assignment. Students would create a list, a playlist, and then they would annotate that list, telling me why they selected particular songs. And then they would do sort of an analytical essay that detailed the history of the type of music that they chose, and then talk about how that music is connected to their place, and then how those two things together are connected to who they are as people. So for example, like I said, my dad's a professional musician and he's the son of Appalachian outmigrants. So I grew up on a steady diet of bluegrass, newgrass, country, singer-songwriters. My Uncle Leroy's even told stories about routinely draining their truck battery so they could power their radio to listen to the Grand Ole Opry. So we are a music-loving people. And for this assignment, I could, and I actually kind of have already started doing this on my own time. I could write about the origins of these musical styles, where and how we picked them up, and how they have served as formative to my place-connected identity and all of its layers. So, my identity as a rural person, my identity as a rural woman, that kind of stuff. I have no doubt that students would turn out incredible lists and accompanying essays. There is research involved, there is annotation, there is narrative and personal essays. So there are lots of standards meeting content here in a way that allows students to bring who they are into the classroom, which makes it a more inclusive space, a more equitable space. Not to mention it means that they would have needed to have read and connected with the book to put their list together in a similar way to, Beat's list. So a project like this ticks a lot of boxes and it does meet standards. So even though it's not a test, this particular project is a lot of heavy lifting in terms of standards, and also like meeting the standards and also allowing students to explore their own interests and identities. And that's really where it's at for me as a teacher. Even now, I try to triangulate all of those things. What do I need to do in terms of accreditation and what the state says I need to do? What do I need to do in order to allow students to enjoy what they're doing? And what does this assignment need to do in order to help them explore and continue to develop as people? Because that's really my main concern. I don't really, if they don't leave my class knowing how to, write a particular type of essay, or they don't remember what iambic pentameter is, I don't really care, as long as they know who they are as people and they have the ability to critically continue to think about that, because they'll continue to grow throughout the rest of their lives. So that's where it's at for me. And like I said, the sort of skeletal idea for this project meets all of those criteria. Well, that is it. Thanks for being here, and I hope you'll pick up this absolute gem of a book. Come back next time to listen in on my conversation with the author herself, Regina M. Hansen, and it was a good one, I'm telling you. I loved that conversation so much. I could have talked to her all day, and I hope you'll listen in, because I learned a lot from talking with her, and I think you could too. In between now and then, if you have a spare moment, would you tell a rural teacher, student, or reader about this podcast? Word of mouth is one of the biggest ways folks can find out about us, about the work that Literacy in Place does, about the work that Reading Rural Y'all does, and trying to get really great rural books like this one into the hands of rural readers so that they can see themselves, whether it's a true mirror or a window that also is shiny enough to give them, bits and pieces of their own reflection. That's what my mission is, and you would really help me out a lot if you would tell other folks about this podcast. It'd also be super helpful if you could review us on Apple Podcasts. It doesn't take too much time, and it would do a heck of a lot of good to get that pesky little algorithm to put us out there and help other people find us. And if you're interested in further supporting the show in a monetary way, you could check out our merch on TeePublic. The link is in the description and the show notes, and buy a sticker or t-shirt or two. Or if you're interested in owning a copy of the book, you could use my affiliate link through bookshop.org to get you a copy. I write, edit, and produce the show all on my own, and any and all of these things would be greatly appreciated. And I'm lucky to have the support of those of you who come back to listen to new episodes and to share with your students and that. And I'm so thankful for that. So thank you so much for doing what you can. And y'all come back now, would you?